Hey, happy Thursday morning to you, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. As you can tell, still got a little bit of hangover from my strep throat, but we're making do. All right. Pardon me. All right. So today, I want to sort of kind of bring our study of in taxei, that is, these things must shortly come to pass, to its close. I've been taking the time to examine this Greek term because that term, behold, I come quickly, or these things must shortly come to pass, Revelation 22, verse 6, and then again in verse 12. We, ha- we have here the promise of the coming of Christ shortly, written 2,000 years ago. That's the return of the absent master in Matthew 25, verse 14 and following. And let me reiterate the argument very simply, and that is this. If the coming of the Lord as the absent master, the return of the absent master of Matthew chapter 25, 14 and following, if that's the return of Christ in the book of Revelation, Revelation 1, 1 to 3, Revelation 22, then since the book of Revelation, and not only the book of Revelation, obviously, but many other New Testament passages, put that event, that return of the absent master, within an imminent context, not just a rapid manner, but in an imminent context, then that means that the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided. It means that the return of the absent master was to happen in the first century, and it corresponds perfectly with the coming of Christ at the time of the end of the Old Covenant age in AD 70. And keep in mind, folks, amillennialists and postmillennialists agree Christ was coming back in AD 70 in the first century generation. They just deny that that's the coming and the return of the absent master of Matthew 25, 14. But again, if the coming of Christ as the return of the absent master in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4, Acts 1, etc., if that's the return of the absent master of Matthew 25, and if the return of the absent master of Matthew 25 is the coming of the Lord in the book of Revelation, which was shortly to come to pass, meaning imminently, then that means, guess what? Matthew 25, 14 and following belongs to the first century return of Christ in AD 70. Now, I want to remind you again, and then we're going to go to Revelation 22, 6 and Revelation 22, 10 to 12 here momentarily. But I want to remind you of something that's very significant. Now, what I'm about to share with you points out the utter total inconsistency of good men, let me emphasize that, who on the one hand, due to their scholarship, they see, they understand, and they teach the linguistic truth. But due to their presuppositional theology, due to their futurism, they then turn right around and they negate everything they said about the linguistics. And that is really, really sad. So I want to share with you again the comments by G.K. Beale in his commentary on Revelation in the New International Greek Testament Commentary. He said, Revelation 1:1, and this is from page 181 of the commentary, Revelation 1:1 is patterned after the broad structure of Daniel 2:28 through 30, verse 45 to 47. Now, Daniel said his prophecy was about the last days. Daniel never said he was in the last days. But here's what Daniel does. Daniel puts his eschatological focus not only on the last days, but on the days of the Roman Empire. Not the days of America, but in the days of the fourth kingdom, which was, without a doubt, the days of Rome. And Daniel's focus, to reiterate, is on the last days. That means that Daniel's eschatological prophecy of the last days is confined to the days of Rome. I'm sorry, Rome doesn't exist today. But that undeniable fact drives home what I'm about to read further from G.K. Beale. The significance of the Old Testament background for verse 1, Revelation 1:1, is best understood from an examination of the following phrase, taxei ha de genesthai, to show what must come to pass, which is, together with intakai, quickly, derived from Daniel chapter 2. Intakai, quickly, is a deliberate substitute for Daniel's in the last days, and connotes, listen to me, neither the speedy manner in which the Daniel prophecy was to be fulfilled, nor the mere possibility that it could be fulfilled at any time, but the definite, imminent time of fulfillment, which likely has already begun. Oh, but wait. Here's the inconsistency. G.K. Beale, a good man. I've met him. I've talked to him. I was on the dais with him at Criswell College some years ago, 2012, I think. Enjoyed it a great deal. I challenged him to debate me. He wouldn't do it. But nonetheless, G.K. Beale says the linguistics here means imminent. Not 2,000 years. Not simply sometime, but imminent. But what does G.K. Beale then do? Well, in his comments on chapter 22, verse 6, verses 10 to 12, he says, well, it means they had begun to take place. They are taking place. They will yet take place in the future. Well, I'm sorry. That violates his own comments about Daniel 2. Daniel 2 is restricted to the days of the Roman Empire. Not 2,000 years later. Now, that brings us to Revelation. I want you to notice Revelation chapter 22, verse 10. Reading from the good old King James, which I still use. Yes, I do. Not exclusively by any means, but anyway. He, that's the angel, said to me, do not seal or seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. Now, he uses the Greek word kairos, which means appointed time. That means it's the time, as Beale appropriately points out, the time appointed by Daniel in Daniel 2. Well, what is that time? The days of the Roman Empire, the last days. The time is gar ingus estin. John was being told the time for the fulfillment was not far off. It was there. The time is. The appointed time is. What's interesting to me is that Beale in chapter 22, commenting on chapter 22, acknowledges this contrast. In Daniel chapter 12, after receiving the vision of the Great Tribulation, the resurrection, the time of the end, and the time of the kingdom, Daniel was told, and the abomination of desolation, Daniel was told, Daniel, seal up the vision, for it is many days to come. You will die and rest with your fathers until the time of the end. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on here. Daniel saw a vision of the abomination of desolation, the great tribulation, the resurrection, the kingdom. And he was told, Daniel, listen to me, it's not for your day. But wait a minute. That prediction of the tribulation, abomination of desolation, resurrection, and kingdom is the same vision in different form, different wording, of Daniel chapter 7. But Daniel chapter 7 foretold the coming of the four kingdoms, and in the days of that fourth kingdom, i.e., which is Rome, what do you find? In the days of that fourth kingdom, you have the coming of the Son of Man. You have the coming of the Son of Man as the Ancient of Days. For what? The vindication of the martyrs and the reception of the kingdom. That's what Daniel chapter 12 is all about. So what does that mean? That means that the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12 restricted to the days of the fourth kingdom, the days of Rome. Oh wait, Daniel chapter 2. The vision of the four kingdoms, which G.K. Beale admits takes us to Rome. But in the days of that fourth empire, that fourth kingdom, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom. That's the kingdom of Daniel 7. That's the kingdom of Daniel chapter 12. Shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Wait a minute. What is that fourth empire? Oh, it's Rome. Now watch this. When Daniel wrote the book of Daniel, now I'm going to round the numbers off. When Daniel was given the vision of what we know as the vision of Daniel, the book of Daniel, from Daniel until John, okay? From Daniel to John was, let's just round it off. It's not technically accurate, I know that, but let's just round it off to 500 years. And Daniel was told, seal the book. It's a long time off. Therefore, in God's calculation of time, and let's not forget, God knows the day and the hour, right? God knew how to tell time. God knows how to tell time. And by the way, He knows how to tell the truth about time. So, in the vision of the time of the end, in the vision that takes us to the days of Rome, in the vision of the abomination of desolation, great tribulation, resurrection, kingdom, Daniel was told, Daniel, it's not for your day. You're going to die. It's a long time off. Seal the book. But then we come to the book of Revelation, which, let me remind you, G.K. Beale says the book of Revelation is based upon what? The book of Daniel and its eschatological prophecies. Okay, so G.K. Beale admits book of Revelation based upon, reiterates the prophecy of Daniel. Daniel foretold abomination of desolation, great tribulation, resurrection and kingdom, but it was far off, it was not near, seal the book. The book of Revelation, patterned after and built on the book of Daniel, and predicted the tribulation, the abomination, resurrection, and kingdom. And John was told, do not seal the vision. The time is. Is. Not shall be. Is. Present active indicative. I'm sorry, folks, if we can't see the contrast between Daniel and Revelation, then we're not paying attention. And I mean no disrespect at all. I don't mean to be unkind, but you know, it is unfortunately true that a lot of people are willingly blind, stubbornly, willfully blind. They refuse to hear. They have closed their ears. They've closed their eyes. They've closed their minds. But the testimony is there. And we need to obey it. Don't forget, tomorrow we will continue our review and refutation of Mr. Kyle Pope's book, Thinking About AD 70. And by the way, thank you so much for the many, many kind remarks I've received about last week's review. Thanks again for joining me. And don't forget, go to my website, Order a copy of my book, Who Is This Babylon, for all of this material and a whole lot more. You'll be glad you did. Make mention of the fact that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. I'll see you in the morning.